Now we take a look at the new zoning ordinance being proposed by the city. The sweeping code was delivered to the Board of Aldermen earlier this spring and has been discussed in meetings, at public hearings, in the news, and on the street. SNN News Director Jane Regan has this story.
The proposed zoning ordinance is over 300 pages long. I don't really have time to read that, but I did have time to catch up with Danielle McLean of the Somerville Journal, who wrote a good article summarizing some of the key points.
The new zoning encourages affordable housing. So in a major commercial hub like Union Square or next to an incoming transit system like the area behind me, if a developer wants to build a residential building with 7 or more units, 20% of those would have to be affordable housing. But in most other districts, the ratio is much lower. So if you're in a residential zone, the ratio would only be 12.5% affordable. Critics say that these numbers are not going to meet the affordable housing goals laid forth in SummerVision. SummerVision calls for 1,200 new units of affordable housing citywide. Critics say the only way to meet that 1,200 affordable housing goal is if you have 20% affordable housing citywide.
McLean also looked at density.
So the new zoning actually encourages property owners and developers to building additional buildings on large lots, depending on what zoning district they are in. So for instance, if a developer wants to build a house right here, the new zoning encourages them to build another house right here. In essence, this means Somerville could become denser.
And McLean considered open space.
The new zoning encourages open space, but not to the extent that is called for in SummerVision. We're over here at Symphony Park, one of the new places the city is trying to build some open space, a publicly accessible park. Critics say the new zoning will bring in about 44 acres of open space, not the 125 acres that is called for in SummerVision.
To read Danielle's article, everything you wanted to know about Somerville's new zoning plan but were afraid to ask, go to the Journal's website, somerville.wickedlocal.com. There have also been some great columns by Somerville residents in the Somerville Times. Their website is thesomervillenews.com. And of course, check out the city's law itself on the new zoning website, somervillema.gov/zoning. Some aldermen are really concerned with the proposed law, to the point that they think it should be thrown out. Others think that it can be fixed. I wanted to know what Ward 5 Alderman Mark Niedergang thought, so I caught up with him the other day.
Unfortunately, there are some major problems with the proposed zoning overhaul. So 3 of the biggest problems, in my opinion, are it changes the whole process by which mostly large projects can be approved and restricts much more the impact that the community can have on affecting what can get built. And that's a problem. Another major problem is that in Somerville, we desperately need more commercial development in order to increase the tax base and also to bring jobs here. And that's a consensus amongst the leaders in the city. Unfortunately, the new proposed zoning doesn't get the balance right between residential and commercial development. It would be too easy for lots and lots of luxury condos to be built all over the city, including in places where we want offices to go in, which generate jobs and tax revenue. So that's a bad thing. They need to go back to the drawing board and get the balance between residential incentives and commercial development incentives. And a third major issue is that while the zoning has been promoted as protecting and conserving our residential neighborhoods, which I completely agree with, in fact, ironically, it allows continued infill development.
Alderman Niedergang wrote a 5-page list of concerns for his blog.
The administration has come forward with a formal proposal, but they have said that they are willing that they want feedback and criticism, and that they will adjust it, amend it, and change it accordingly. Unfortunately, there's not just 3 or 4 major concerns, there's really a dozen. And I should say that, these are not necessarily my personal analysis. There are lots of smart people out there who have been looking at the zoning ordinance, the proposal, and writing up their analyses. And most of what I'm talking about comes from other people's analyses. So there is a formal process that involves a public hearing and a public comment period, and then a 90-day window during which the Board of Aldermen can consider a zoning proposal, and if nothing is done at the end of those 90 days, the proposal simply dies. We could also vote it down, or we could approve it, or some amended version of it if we wished. Right now, my sense is that most of the members of the board share a lot of concerns that I have. The administration now, the planning department, are in the process of revising their original draft based on the extensive feedback that they've gotten from the public, and they'll be coming forward with some revised ideas at a meeting we're going to be having on May 6th at 6 o'clock in City Hall. But I believe, and I think most of my colleagues on the Board of Aldermen believe, that there simply isn't enough time in the 90-day window, which ends at the end of June, for us to look at a new set of proposals that fix the problems that existed and discuss it and figure out whether it makes sense or not. So I think most likely this current proposal will die or maybe be voted down. And my hope is that the administration takes the feedback they've gotten and comes forward with a new and dramatically different proposal this fall, which would be much more in the ballpark of something that the Board of Aldermen would be willing to consider approving.
The alderman asked me to meet him at Highland and Cedar. I wasn't sure why.
We're standing at the corner of Cedar Street and Highland Avenue in Ward 5 in front of the Quick Mart, which was a convenience store which closed about 9 months ago. And it's been purchased by a developer who wants to put up a mixed-use housing and commercial project here. And there's been 2 neighborhood meetings, and one of the issues around this is whether this should be 3 stories or 4 stories at this site. There's been a lot of public discussion and debate. The developer had submitted a proposal to have a 4-story building, 44 feet high, with 7 units of housing and a commercial space on the first floor. And this is being discussed and debated, and it's come up as part of the zoning overhaul because the administration's proposal has this as 3 stories, and the developer has petitioned to make it a 4-story area. So we have a 3-story building on this side, and on this side there's a 5-story building. So these are the kinds of development issues, I think it's illustrative, these are the kinds of development issues that we have in particular spots in our neighborhoods. This is where the rubber meets the road on zoning. It really affects what our neighborhoods are going to look like, and I thought this would be a good example of that.
Another place the rubber will meet the road is in Union Square. According to the proposed ordinance, most of the Union Square area would be zoned MU5 for 5 stories, 60 feet for residential and 70 feet for commercial. That's pretty tall. It's kind of hard to imagine, but here are some ideas of what that might look like. And here's an artist's drawing. Some critics are concerned about the canyon that might be created. Others point out that the MU5 zoning is right next to residential properties, meaning houses could back up to a 70-foot wall. City Hall noted that the Planning Division is pleased with the public comment process. As of April 16th, City Hall had received over 1,000 comments at the public hearing, in letters, and on the website. What will happen at the May 6th meeting? Can the current ordinance be fixed up, or will it be thrown out, and will the city have to go back to the drawing board? We'll keep you posted on this issue. For Somerville Neighborhood News, I'm Jane Regan.